The great lecture hall of the Astral Naval Academy was a monument to knowledge and power. It was a massive, circular room that could hold 1,000 cadets. Its walls were smooth, pale metal, and the air always smelled clean and recycled. Soft, blue light glowed from the ceiling. In the center of the room, a giant holographic projector hummed quietly, ready to display wonders and horrors from across the galaxy. Today, it showed horrors. Instructor Park stood before the silent rows of young cadets. He was a tall, serious man with a sharp jaw and eyes that had seen combat. A thin, silver cybernetic implant ran along the side of his head, tracing the line of his temple. It flickered with a faint, blue light as he spoke. His voice was deep and commanded absolute attention. "The galaxy is a place of beauty," he began, his hands clasped behind his back. "But it is also a place of death. Your survival and the survival of those you will one day command depends on your ability to tell the difference." The hologram behind him shifted. It showed a world of swirling, violet gas. Jagged rocks, sharp as knives, floated in the violent atmosphere. Etheria 9, a Class 12 death world. Its gravity storms can crush a battle cruiser into a ball of scrap metal in seconds. Uninhabitable, unreachable. The image changed again. This time it was a forest of pulsating orange fungi. The ground seemed to breathe. A large, six-legged creature, covered in spines, stepped onto a patch of what looked like moss. In an instant, sticky tendrils shot up from the ground, wrapping around the creature and pulling it down. The forest slowly went quiet. "Xylos," Instructor Park said, his voice flat. "The very planet itself is a carnivore. The air is filled with spores that can digest a living being from the inside out. Uninhabitable, unreachable." He paced slowly across the platform, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. For a world to be classified as a death world, it must present multiple, constant, and extreme threats to human life. Gravity that shatters bones, atmospheres that poison or choke, flora and fauna that see you only as food. These are places we chart, we observe from a very safe distance, and we leave alone. They are nature's perfect killing machines. He stopped and turned to face the cadets. His gaze was heavy. "But there is one world that stands above them all. The original, the template for all death worlds that followed." The hologram dissolved into a cloud of static, then resolved into a new image. A collective, soft gasp went through the hall. It was a beautiful, swirling marble of blue and white. Lush green continents were visible under swirls of bright cloud. It looked peaceful. It looked like a paradise. "This," Instructor Park said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is Earth." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cadets. Earth. The word was a myth, a legend. The cradle of humanity. The home none of them had ever seen. "It is the most lethal Class 12 environment ever catalogued," Instructor Park continued, his tone turning hard and cold. "Do not let its beauty fool you. This is a lie." The hologram zoomed in. The blue oceans were shown to be filled with creatures that had rows of razor-sharp teeth. The green forests hid predators that moved with silent, deadly speed. The very ground was unstable, with tectonic plates that shifted without warning, creating mountains and swallowing cities in moments. Every single life form on this planet, from the smallest microbe to the largest animal, is engaged in a perpetual war for survival. The pollen in the air can trigger allergic reactions that stop a person's heart. A simple scratch from a plant's thorn can deliver a neurotoxin that causes a painful, paralyzing death. The gravity itself is a brutal, constant force that would grind your bones to dust over time. He let the images sink in. The cadets watched, mesmerized and horrified. "Our ancestors," Instructor Park said, "were born from this chaos. They fought, they bled, and they somehow clawed their way to the top of this terrifying food chain. But it was not a victory. It was a temporary escape. Millennia ago, they saw the future. They saw that the planet was changing, becoming even more volatile. The atmosphere was shifting. The gravity was increasing. So they built the Great Generation ships. They fled. They left their cradle behind to find a gentler existence among the stars. He pointed a finger at the beautiful, deadly world. The Great Exodus was our species' greatest achievement. It was our salvation. The Earth you see now is not the Earth of our history books. The changes our ancestors predicted came to pass. The atmospheric pressure is now so great it would feel like an ocean crushing you. The oxygen level is so high it would be like breathing fire. No ship we possess can land through that soup. The radiation and gravitational shear would tear any vessel apart. It is a tomb, a beautiful, perfect, and utterly unreachable tomb. It is a memorial to what we were, and a reminder of why we must be vigilant. The hall was utterly silent. The weight of his words pressed down on everyone. The idea that all of humanity had come from such a place felt impossible. Instructor Park gave a single, sharp nod. This is the most important lesson you will learn at this academy. Know your limits. Respect the power of nature. There are some doors in this universe that are closed for a reason. Earth is the first and the final closed door. It is. A single hand went up. It was in the third row. A simple, calm gesture that broke the intense atmosphere of the lecture. Instructor Park stopped, his sentence unfinished. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He did not like interruptions, especially during this, his most important lecture. His eyes narrowed, trying to see who it was. The cadets around the raised hand also turned to look. It was a young woman named Gina. She was quiet, and most people didn't notice her. She had dark hair tied neatly back and calm, thoughtful eyes. She was not the most talkative cadet, nor the most flashy. But she always had a certain stillness about her, a feeling of solidity. Her friend, a cadet named Chul, who sat beside her, looked at her with surprise. He knew she was strong and incredibly focused, but to interrupt Instructor Park? This was madness. Instructor, Chul whispered urgently, "Put your hand down." Gina did not listen. Her arm remained raised, steady and unwavering. Instructor Park took a slow breath. "Cadet Gina," he said, his voice cool. "You have a question?" Gina stood up. The movement was smooth and effortless, unlike the nervous shuffling of other cadets. The eyes of the entire hall were on her. She seemed smaller under their gaze, but she did not shrink. She met Instructor Park's stern look with a calmness that was unsettling. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and firm. It did not shake. It carried through the silent hall with an unnatural weight. "With respect, Instructor," she said, "your data is incomplete." A wave of shocked whispers spread through the cadets. To challenge Instructor Park was one thing. To challenge him about Earth was unthinkable. Instructor Park's jaw tightened. His cybernetic implant glowed a little brighter. "Is that so, Cadet? And what, pray tell, is incomplete about the unified scientific consensus of the entire galactic concord?" Gina paused. She looked from the instructor's angry face to the beautiful, deadly hologram of Earth behind him. A faint, almost sad smile touched her lips. It was a look of someone remembering a distant, personal memory. Then she said the words that would shatter the reality of every person in the room. "I walked Earth barefoot." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than any gravity, more suffocating than any atmosphere. It was the silence of a fundamental truth being broken. Chul stared at his friend, his mouth slightly open. He had known she was different. He had seen her outperform everyone in physical training without seeming to tire. He had seen her calm in situations that made others panic. But this was not just different. This was impossible. Instructor Park simply stood there, frozen. The hologram of Earth continued to turn slowly behind him. A serene blue marble that had just been claimed by a quiet girl from the third row. The closed door, it seemed, had just been kicked open. The silence from the lecture hall followed Chul like a ghost. He walked through the wide, brightly lit corridors of the academy, the usual sounds of chatter and marching feet feeling distant and muffled. All anyone could talk about was Gina. The whispers buzzed around him like angry insects. "Did you hear her? She's insane. They'll kick her out for sure. Walked Earth barefoot? What a lie." Chul ignored them. His mind was a storm of confusion. He had sat beside Gina for months. She was his friend. She was quiet, yes, and incredibly strong, but she was also the most honest person he knew. She didn't joke about things like this. She didn't seek attention. So why would she say something so impossible? He found her in the cadet commons, a vast room with large windows that looked out at the stars. Most cadets were in groups, talking and laughing, but Gina was sitting alone at a small table in a quiet corner. She wasn't looking at the stars. She was looking at a small, potted plant that sat on the table. It was a simple green thing, a type of fern that was common on the station. But she was looking at it with an intensity Chul had never seen, as if she were reading a whole story in its leaves. He walked over and sat down across from her. The chair was made of a smooth, synthetic polymer, designed to be comfortable and unbreakable. "Gina," he said, his voice low. "What was that in there?" She didn't look up from the plant right away. Her finger gently traced the edge of one leaf. "They think I'm lying," she said, her voice calm. It wasn't a question. "Of course they think you're lying," Chul said, trying to keep his voice down. "Everyone thinks you're lying." Instructor Park looked like he was going to have a system failure. "They're saying you'll be discharged for mental instability." Finally, she looked at him. Her dark eyes were the same as always, but now he saw a deep old knowledge in them that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the look of someone who had seen things he could never imagine. "I am not lying, Chul," she said. Her voice was simple and direct. "Then how?" he asked, spreading his hands. "How is it possible?" "You heard him. No ship can land. The atmosphere would crush us. The gravity. It's all impossible." She was silent for a long moment, as if deciding something. She looked from his face to her own hands, which were resting on the table. They looked like normal hands, maybe a little stronger than most. "My grandmother's grandmother," Gina began slowly. "She was on the last scout ship, the one called the Star Pioneer." Chul nodded. Everyone knew the story of the last ships to leave Earth. They were legends. The official story is that everyone made it to the generation ships and left the solar system, Gina said. But that's not what happened. Not for everyone. The Star Pioneer was badly damaged during a solar flare. They were left behind. They couldn't keep up with the main fleet. They were given a choice: drift in space and die, or try to go back. Chul stared at her, his mind struggling to catch up. Go back? To Earth? But it was already dying. The changes had started. They didn't go back to the cities, Gina explained. They went to the wild places, the mountains, the deep forests. They were engineers and scientists, but they became survivors. They decided to try. They decided to stay. The idea was so huge, so shocking, that Chul could barely process it. A group of humans stranded on Earth after the Exodus? It was the biggest secret in human history. The planet changed, Gina continued, her gaze drifting back to the plant. The gravity got stronger. The air became thick and rich with oxygen. Storms became more violent. Plants and animals grew tougher, fiercer. Most of the survivors died. It was very hard, but some lived. Their bodies changed over the generations. Their bones became denser. Their muscles grew stronger to handle the gravity. Their lungs learned to process the thick, fiery air. Their senses became sharp, to hear the predator in the wind, to smell the poison on a leaf. As she spoke, Chul began to understand. Her quiet strength, the way she could run for hours without getting tired, the time she had caught a falling tool crate that would have crushed another cadet's foot, moving with a speed that was just a blur. "You," he whispered. "I am a child of Earth," Gina said, her voice filled with a strange mix of pride and sadness. "My parents, they wanted me to see the stars. They wanted me to know the rest of humanity. They used old, forgotten technology, a ship built from scavenged parts and shielded with stone and lead to hide from the planet's own defenses. It was a dangerous journey. I was very young when I arrived here, brought by a friend of my family who knew the way. It was a story so vast it made the Academy feel small and fragile. The entire galactic concord, with its thousands of worlds and advanced technology, was built by people who had run away. And Gina was from the ones who had stayed and fought. But why tell everyone? Chul asked, still overwhelmed. Why now? Because he was wrong, Gina said, a flicker of fire in her eyes. He called our home a tomb. He said it was unreachable. It is not a tomb. It is a garden. A hard garden, yes. A dangerous one. But it is alive and my people are alive. They need to know. Just then, a group of cadets walked past their table. One of them, a tall, confident cadet named Day, smirked at Gina. Hey, Barefoot, he said, his voice loud and mocking. Did you remember to pack your gravity boots for your next walk? His friends laughed. Chul felt his face grow hot with anger. But Gina didn't even flinch. She just looked at Day with that same calm, ancient look. Day, annoyed by her lack of reaction, walked closer. You know, for someone from a death world, you don't look so tough. He reached out and poked her shoulder. A disrespectful, jabbing motion. It happened faster than Chul could see. Gina's hand moved. She didn't stand up. She didn't make a fist. She simply placed her open palm flat on the synthetic tabletop. Her fingers relaxed for a second, and then she pressed down. There was a sound. A sharp, distinct crack. It wasn't loud, but in the hum of the commons, it was as clear as a bell. Everyone nearby stopped talking and looked. Day's smirk vanished, replaced by confusion. Gina lifted her hand. Where her fingertips had been, there were 5 small, hairline fractures pressed into the hard, unbreakable surface of the table. They were perfect impressions, like fossils. She looked up at Day, her expression unchanged. The ground on Earth is softer than this, she said, her voice quiet but clear, and much more forgiving. Day took a step back, his face pale. He looked from the cracked table to Gina's calm face, and then he quickly turned and walked away, his friends following in stunned silence. Chul stared at the fractures. He reached out and traced one with his finger. The material was designed to withstand tools and impacts. It wasn't supposed to break from a person's touch. He looked at Gina's hand. It looked normal. There was no mark, no strain. At that moment, all his doubts vanished. The impossible story became the only possible truth. The data in the lecture hall was incomplete. The universe was much bigger and much stranger than he had been taught. And his quiet friend, Gina, was the most dangerous and amazing person he had ever met. The story of the cracked table spread through the academy faster than a computer virus. Whispers followed Gina everywhere. Some cadets looked at her with fear, others with disbelief. Most just thought it was a clever trick. But the command staff of the academy did not ignore it. 2 days after the lecture, Gina and Chul were called to the office of Dean Suman. The office was large and peaceful, with a real water fountain in the corner, a rare luxury. Dean Suman was an older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm manner. Instructor Park stood beside her desk, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Cadet Gina? Dean Suman began, her voice gentle but firm. Your claim is extraordinary. It challenges the foundation of our history and our understanding of science. And the incident in the Commons has created a situation. It was not an incident, Instructor Park said, his voice tight. It was a display, a very concerning one. We cannot have a cadet spreading wild stories, Dean Suman continued. Nor can we ignore a potential physical anomaly. Therefore, we have decided on a course of action. You will undergo a standard simulation trial, the same one all cadets face in their final exams. We will use the planetary simulation chamber. Chul felt a knot form in his stomach. The simulation chamber was infamous. It was a vast, circular room that could recreate any known environment with terrifying realism. The threats were not real, but the physical feedback from the suits and the environmental controls made it feel real. People had failed out of the academy after breaking down in that chamber. This is not a punishment, cadet, Dean Suman said, seeing the look on Chul's face. It is an inquiry. We will also include Cadet Day and Cadet Me. They are 2 of our top performers. We will observe. We will collect data. The scenario will be Viridia Prime, a known Class 8 death world. Do you agree to this? Gina nodded. I understand. Good. The trial begins in 1 hour. The planetary simulation chamber was a giant, dark dome. A narrow walkway led to a central platform. The walls were lined with hundreds of thousands of tiny projectors and sensor nodes. Chul stood in the observation gallery, a room behind a thick pane of transparent armor. He could see Dean Sumin and Instructor Park at a complex control console, their faces lit by glowing screens. Inside the chamber, 3 figures stood on the platform. Gina in a standard simulation suit. Day, who looked confident and ready, flashing a competitive grin at the one-way window. And Mie, a brilliant and focused cadet who was checking her equipment with calm efficiency. Initiating Viridia Prime simulation, a computerized voice announced. Primary objective, survive for 12 hours. Secondary objective, secure a water source. The dark dome vanished. In an instant, they were standing in a jungle so real Chul could almost smell the damp, rotting leaves. Giant, purple trees towered overhead, their canopies blocking most of the light. The air in the observation gallery grew humid as the chamber's environmental systems engaged. The sounds of clicking insects and distant, strange bird calls filled the air. Day immediately took charge. Right? Standard procedure. Mie, scan for water signatures. I'll set up a perimeter defense. Gina, just try to keep up. He activated his wrist scanner, a device that would detect water and mineral deposits. Mei began deploying small sensor drones that buzzed into the thick foliage. Gina did none of these things. She simply stood still. She closed her eyes and took a slow, deep breath. On the monitor showing her vital signs, her heart rate was incredibly low and steady. What is she doing? Instructor Park muttered, watching her data stream. Suddenly, Gina's eyes snapped open. Don't move, she said, her voice calm but clear through the audio feed. Day scoffed. What are you talking about? We don't have time for. Before he could finish, Gina took a quick step towards me, whose foot was hovering over a patch of what looked like ordinary red moss. Gina gently pulled her back. The moment Mi's foot moved away, the red moss shuddered and released a cloud of tiny, sparkling spores that hung in the air where her leg had been. The spores are acidic, Gina said, pointing to a nearby tree trunk that was pitted with holes. They would have dissolved your boot and then your flesh. Mi stared, her face pale. My scanners didn't pick that up. The plant gives off a very faint smell of metal when something warm is close, Gina explained simply in the observation room. Dean Sumin leaned forward. Note that. The scanners missed it. She didn't. The simulation continued. Day, annoyed, led them towards a ravine where his scanner indicated water. As they approached the edge, a low growl echoed from the dense undergrowth. A creature emerged. It was the size of a large dog, with 6 legs, armored plates, and a mouth full of rotating, razor-sharp teeth. It was a Viridian Ravager, one of the planet's top predators. Day didn't hesitate. He raised his simulation rifle and fired. A blue energy bolt hit the creature's armor and sizzled, doing no damage. The Ravager snarled and charged. Its armor is too strong, he yelled, firing her own weapon with the same lack of effect. Gina didn't reach for a weapon. She watched the creature's movement. As it leaped towards Day, she moved. It wasn't a run. It was a blur of motion. She stepped inside its reach, avoiding the slashing claws. Her hand shot out not as a fist, but with 2 fingers extended. She struck the creature precisely at the joint where its head met its armored neck. There was a sickening crack from the simulation speakers. The Ravager collapsed to the ground, twitched once, and then lay still. The system registered a fatal blow. The chamber fell silent, except for the jungle sounds. Day and me stared at the dead creature, then at Gina. She stood calmly, her breathing even. How did you know to do that? Mie asked, her voice full of awe. The neck joint is a weakness in most vertebrates, Gina said. You just have to hit the right spot. In the observation room, Instructor Park was staring at the main screen, which was displaying Gina's physiological data. "Look at this," he said, his voice hushed. He pointed to the readings for muscle density, bone mass, and neural reaction speed. The numbers were far outside the normal human range. They were in the red zone, the area reserved for theoretical maximums. "Her body is different," Dean Sumin whispered. The simulation threw more at them. A sudden downpour of acidic rain. Gina immediately identified a large-leafed plant that secreted a neutralizer, telling them to cover themselves with the leaves. A swarm of flying stingers. Gina led them to a cave filled with a gas that was harmless to them but toxic to the insects. A gas her scanner hadn't identified, but which she said she could smell was safe. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She moved through the deadly jungle as if she were taking a walk in a park she knew by heart. When the 12 hours were up and the simulation faded, revealing the plain dome again, Day and me looked exhausted and battered. Gina looked the same as when she had started. The 3 cadets were ushered into the observation room. Day couldn't even look at Gina. Instructor Park turned from the console. His face was serious, but the anger was gone, replaced by a look of deep, profound shock. He looked at Gina not as a lying cadet, but as something entirely new. "The data does not lie," he said, his voice low and respectful. He gestured to the screens, which were still showing the incredible numbers from Gina's body. "Your biology, it isn't just human. It's terrestrial." He looked from Gina to Dean Sumin, the truth finally settling onto his shoulders. "It's all true." The air in Dean Sumin's office was thick with a new kind of silence. It was not the silence of disbelief or anger. It was the heavy, humming silence of a universe that had just gotten much larger. The data from the simulation chamber was displayed on a large screen, the numbers a silent scream of truth. Gina stood calmly before the desk. Chul stood slightly behind her, a steady presence of support. Instructor Park leaned against a wall, his arms crossed, staring at the floor as if seeing it for the first time. Dean Sumin was the first to speak. "The evidence is undeniable, Cadet Gina. Please accept my apology. The Academy and the Concord owes you and your people a great debt. We forgot our own history." Gina gave a small, respectful nod. "You were told a story that was easier to believe, that you escaped a dying world. The truth is, the world was not dying. It was being reborn, and so were the people on it." Instructor Park looked up, his sharp eyes focused on Gina. "The official records state that all long-range scans of the Sol system show no signs of human life. The energy signatures are chaotic, consistent only with a planet in constant, violent change. How is that possible? If your people are there, where are the signs? The power sources? The cities?" "There are no cities," Gina said. "Not on the surface. Not anymore. We live with the planet, not on top of it. Our power is geothermal, gravitational, hidden deep underground. Our technology is different. It is grown, not built. It is made from wood and stone and crystal, designed to be part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. Your scanners look for fusion signatures and plasma trails. They would not recognize what we have." Dean Sumin exchanged a long look with Instructor Park. A silent conversation seemed to pass between them. Finally, the dean gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Instructor," she said, "show them." Instructor Park walked to the wall and pressed his hand against a smooth panel. It glowed, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a small, private elevator. "Come with me," he said. "What you are about to see is a secret known only to a handful of people in the entire Concord." They descended deep into the bedrock of the Academy. The elevator opened into a cold, dimly lit room that hummed with power. It was an astrometrics lab, but unlike any Chul had ever seen. The equipment was older, bulkier, and looked more powerful. In the center of the room was a massive, dark screen. "This is the long-range deep scan array," Instructor Park explained. "It is a relic from the early Exodus days, more sensitive than our modern systems. We use it to listen for anomalies. For years, we have been detecting a signal from the Sol system. It is very faint, buried in the natural radio noise of the planet and the sun. The official scientific council dismisses it as stellar interference. We were not so sure. He entered a series of commands into a console. The large screen flickered to life, showing a complex waveform of sound and light. It was a mess of static, pops, and hisses. To Chul, it sounded like nothing, like empty space. "Listen," Instructor Park said. They listened. Chul heard nothing but the random noise. Mei, who had been quietly invited for her technical skills, frowned in concentration. "It's just background radiation," she said after a moment. Gina, however, had closed her eyes. Her head was tilted slightly. She was perfectly still. "No," she whispered. Her voice was soft but certain. "It is not a machine." She opened her eyes and looked at the screen as if she could see a picture in the chaos. "It is a heartbeat." Chul stared at her. "A heartbeat? It is a biological beacon," Gina said. Her voice filled with a sudden, warm recognition. "It is not made of metal and wires. It is the sound of the world itself. The pulse of the planetary magnetic field, modulated by the great crystal forests that grow in the northern mountains. My people, they learned to sing with the planet. They are still there. They are calling." The revelation hung in the cold air. A beacon made not by hands, but by a world and its people, working together. "But the barrier," Chul said, turning to Instructor Park. "You said no ship can land. The atmospheric pressure, the gravity shear." Instructor Park manipulated the console again. The screen changed, showing a diagram of Earth. It was surrounded by a furious, swirling storm of energy. "That is what we thought," he said, his voice grim. "But our new analysis, using Gina's biological data as a key, suggests something else." He zoomed in on the energy field. "This is not a natural phenomenon. The patterns are too ordered. It is a shield, a planetary defense system of a kind we have never seen." Mi's eyes widened as she looked at the data. "It's modulating the magnetosphere, using the planet's own core as a power source. It's creating a filter." "A filter for what?" Chul asked. "For us," Gina answered, her voice sad. "Look at the energy signature. It is tuned to react to specific technologies. High-energy fusion drives, plasma-based weapons, advanced composite metals, the things that define modern Concorde ships." She looked at the terrifying image on the screen, and her expression was one of understanding, not fear. "It is not a tomb. It is a sanctuary. They are not keeping us out because the planet is dead. They are keeping you out because your technology is like a disease to it. Your ships are seen as invaders, as infections. The planet defends itself. It burns away the sickness." The room was silent as they all processed this. Earth wasn't unreachable because it was a dead world. It was unreachable because it was a protected world. A garden that had learned to keep out the gardeners who had forgotten how to tend it without poison and fire. Dean Sumin looked at Gina, her expression one of profound respect. "They are not just survivors, are they?" Gina shook her head. "No. They are stewards, and they have been waiting, for a very, very long time, for a part of themselves to come home." She looked at the heartbeat on the screen, a signal no machine could properly hear. "They are calling for me." The small, experimental corvette named Wayfarer moved through the void like a ghost. It was a ship built for silence and stealth, its hull coated in a material that absorbed radar and sensor waves. Inside, the mood was tense and quiet. The hum of the engines was a low, nervous vibration. The crew was small. Instructor Park was at the command station, his face set in a mask of concentration. Mei was at the science console, her eyes glued to the long-range scanner readings. Chul was helping her, his job to monitor the ship's power levels. And at the co-pilot seat was Day, his hands resting on the controls. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. He was the best pilot in the academy, and for this mission they needed the best. Gina stood in the center of the bridge, watching the main view screen. A beautiful blue and white marble grew larger with each passing second. "Earth. Home. We are approaching the boundary of the energy shield," Mei announced, her voice tight. The radiation levels are rising. On the screen, the planet looked peaceful. But around it, visible only on the sensors, was a furious storm of energy. It was the shield, the filter that had kept Earth safe and isolated for 1,000 years. "Ready the dampeners," Instructor Park ordered. "We will proceed slowly. The theory is that our low-emission drive and primitive hull composition will let us slip through. We are not using the technology the shield is designed to target." The Wayfarer crept closer. The ship began to shudder. A low whine started deep within its structure. "It's not working," Day said, his knuckles white on the controls. "The shield is reading us as foreign. It's pushing back." Alarms blared across the bridge. Red lights flashed. "Gravitational shear is increasing," Miai shouted. "Hull integrity is at 80% and falling." The ship shook violently. Chul was thrown against his console. They were being torn apart. The shield saw their ship, even with its stealth technology, as a threat. It was rejecting them. "It's the computer core," Gina said, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "And the life support systems. Even our basic electronics are too advanced. The shield reads any complex circuitry as a disease. It sees you as a sickness to be burned away. We have to pull back," Day yelled, fighting the controls. "We can't make it." Instructor Park looked at the data, his face grim. They were failing. The door was still closed. Then Gina spoke again. "I have to go alone." Everyone turned to look at her. "There is an old re-entry pod in the cargo bay," she said. "The Starling. It's from the early Exodus era. It has no computer, no advanced electronics. It is controlled by manual levers and hydraulics. It is made of simple ceramics and titanium. The shield might not even see it." "That thing is a museum piece," Day argued. "It's not space-worthy. The heat shield is probably brittle. You'll burn up." "It is the only way," Gina said, her eyes meeting Instructor Park's. "The shield is a part of the planet. It is part of me. It will recognize me, but only if I am in something it does not see as a threat." Instructor Park held her gaze for a long moment. He saw the absolute certainty in her eyes. He saw the steward ready to return to her garden. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Do it." There was no time for long goodbyes. Chul followed Gina to the cargo bay. The Starling was a small, rounded pod, scarred and old. It looked like a stone compared to their sleek ship. "Gina?" Chul said, his voice choked with fear for his friend. "This is crazy." She turned and placed a hand on his arm. Her grip was firm and reassuring. "It is the only path, Chul. Tell them I made it. Tell them what you see." Before he could argue, she climbed into the pod and sealed the hatch. The mechanics were loud and heavy. Through a small, thick window, he saw her give him a final, calm smile. The Wayfarer released the pod. The little Starling tumbled away, a tiny seed falling towards a giant world. "Tracking the pod," Mei said, her voice a whisper on the bridge. The Wayfarer pulled back to a safe distance, its systems stabilizing as it moved away from the violent energy field. On the main screen, they watched the pod's descent. It was a crude video feed, shaky and full of static. The pod entered the upper atmosphere. A glow of intense heat surrounded it. For a terrifying moment, it was a shooting star, trailing fire. "Is the heat shield holding?" Instructor Park asked. "It's holding," Mei confirmed, her voice filled with awe. "The shield energy is ignoring it. It's treating it like space debris." The pod fell through the clouds. The video feed flickered, showing brief, blurry images. Green, so much green, and blue. The air was thick, making the image waver. Then, with a final, heavy thud, the pod landed. The video feed stabilized. They were looking at a jungle. It was not like the simulation. It was more. The colors were brighter, more vibrant. The trees were colossal, their trunks wider than the Wayfarer. Strange, beautiful flowers bloomed in explosions of color. The air seemed to shimmer with life. The hatch of the pod hissed open. Gina stepped out. She stood for a moment, breathing deeply. On the bridge of the Wayfarer, They watched her vital signs on a monitor. Her body, which had seemed so strange to them, was now functioning at perfect, optimal levels. She was home. She took a step, her boot sinking into the soft, rich soil. Then she bent down, untied her boots and pulled them off. She peeled away her socks. She stood barefoot on the earth. She wiggled her toes in the dark soil, a look of pure, peaceful joy on her face that they had never seen before. From the edge of the colossal trees, a creature emerged. It was a wolf, but larger than any on record. Its fur was thick and gray, and its intelligent eyes glowed with a faint green light. It was a predator, a killer. Chul's breath caught in his throat. The giant wolf looked at Gina. It sniffed the air. Then, it lowered its head in a slow, deliberate bow. Gina reached out her hand. Not in fear, but in greeting. The wolf nudged her palm with its nose, then turned and melted back into the forest. Gina looked up, directly at the camera on the pod, as if she could see her friends light years away. "She is not a visitor," Instructor Park whispered, his voice full of reverence. "She is a part of it." On the screen, Gina, the girl who had walked Earth barefoot, began to walk into the green, overwhelming garden, finally home. Gina walked through the forest, and it was like stepping into a living, breathing dream. The air was thick and sweet, filled with the scent of wet earth and strange, blooming flowers. Sunlight filtered through the colossal leaves overhead, painting the ground in shifting patterns of gold and green. The gravity that would have crushed another human felt like a warm, heavy blanket to her. This was not a death world. This was a world, vibrant and whole, and she was a part of it. She followed a path only she could sense, a feeling in her blood that pulled her forward. The giant wolf walked beside her for a time, a silent guardian, before fading back into the shadows. The forest was not silent. It was filled with sounds, chitters, calls, the rustle of unseen life, but none of them felt threatening. They were the sounds of a busy, thriving home. She came to a clearing where a wide, powerful river cut through the stone. And there she saw them. People. They emerged from the trees, from behind great rocks, their movements as fluid and quiet as the river itself. They were dressed in clothes made from woven fibers and soft leathers. They looked like Gina, strong, with a calm stillness in their eyes that spoke of generations of peace and purpose. They did not look like survivors. They looked like they belonged. An old woman stepped forward. Her hair was long and white, and her face was a map of gentle wrinkles, but her back was straight and her eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. She was Hannah. Hannah looked at Gina, and a slow, warm smile spread across her face. She did not look surprised. She opened her arms. Gina walked into her embrace. It was strong and sure. "You have returned to us, little one," Hannah said, her voice like the sound of the river over stones. "We felt your song in the world's pulse. We knew you were coming home." "The others are with me," Gina said, pulling back. "In a ship above the sky. They are afraid. They think this is a place of death." Hannah nodded, her smile fading into a look of deep understanding. "They were taught a story of fear. They were told they escaped a corpse. They did not understand that they abandoned a living mother." "Come. Let them see." On the bridge of the Wayfarer, the crew watched, mesmerized. The video feed from Gina's pod showed the clearing, the river, and the people. They saw the embrace. They look like us," Chul whispered, but he knew it wasn't true. They looked like what humans were supposed to be. They stood with an effortless strength, their faces free of the stress and worry that was so common in the Concord. Instructor Park stared, his theory of a savage, dying world crumbling to dust. "They are not hiding in caves," he murmured. "They are living in the open." Hannah led Gina to a flat, smooth stone by the riverbank. She gestured for her to sit, then looked directly at the pod's camera, as if she knew they were watching. "People of the stars," Hannah's voice came through the speaker, clear and strong. "You have been told a lie. You were not saved by leaving. You were separated." She picked up a handful of rich, dark soil. "The Great Exodus was a time of fear. Our ancestors saw the planet changing, becoming stronger, and they were afraid. They chose to run to softer worlds, where they would not have to fight for every breath. It was a choice, and we do not blame them for it. She let the soil trickle through her fingers. But a seed does not blame the tree it fell from. We are that seed. We are the ones who stayed. We learned to listen to the world, not fight it. We learned that the violence you see is just life, lived at its most passionate. The gravity makes us strong. The air makes our hearts powerful. The challenges make us wise. She gestured to the vibrant, terrifying jungle around her. This is not a tomb. It is a school, and we are its students. Gina spoke then, her voice bridging the gap between the two worlds. They shielded the planet, she explained to her friends on the ship. Not to be cruel, to protect it. Your technology, your ships, and your cities, they scar worlds. They consume and they leave waste. Earth's ecosystem is too delicate, too powerful to allow that. The shield burns away the high-energy pollution before it can poison the soil and the air. It is an immune system. Dean Suman's voice, transmitted from the academy, came over the comms, filled with awe. So we are the infection. No, Hannah said gently. You are the lost children, but you have forgotten how to live in a garden without tearing it apart. We are not your enemies. We are your family, and we have been waiting for you to remember. A year later, the main lecture hall of the Astral Naval Academy was once again full of cadets. The air buzzed with a new kind of energy. Instructor Park stood on the platform, but he was not alone. Beside him stood Gina. She wore the uniform of a cadet ambassador, but her feet, as always, were bare on the cool floor. And standing with her were 3 new cadets. They were taller, their posture more relaxed, their eyes holding the same ancient calm as Gina's. They were the first Earthborn students. The hologram behind them was no longer a terrifying display of monsters and storms. It showed the same beautiful blue marble, but now it was labeled differently. It did not say Class 12 Deathworld or Unreachable. In large, clear letters, it read, Protected. Instructor Park addressed the new class, his voice different now. It had lost its cold edge and was filled with a sense of wonder. The most important lesson you will learn at this academy, he began, is not about the dangers of the universe. It is about the dangers of forgetting. We forgot where we came from. We called our own home a death world because we were too weak to understand its strength. He gestured to Gina and the new cadets. Cadet Gina taught us that humanity's greatest strength was not in fleeing its past, but in the power that past still holds. Earth is not a closed door. It is our first home, and we are learning, slowly, how to be worthy of it again. The story of the girl who walked Earth barefoot was no longer a wild rumor. It was the new origin story for a galaxy that had just rediscovered its heart. And as the first Earthborn cadets walked among their starfaring cousins, they began to teach the most valuable lesson of all. That true strength is not the power to destroy, but the resilience to live, in harmony with a universe that is both beautiful and wild.